Sealed Starseed of Gaia, the source moved tonight, not in your favor in the distant way you have been hoping, but in fury on your behalf with precision, because what was done to you has been registered at a level no human system can reach or reverse. I am Auriela, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian Protocol Keepers. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. They have already mapped this sequence. I am only naming what they have confirmed. You did not scroll to this by accident. Your soul called this in long before you opened the screen. Something inside you has been waiting, not for comfort, but for instruction. And the instruction is this: do not say a word. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening in your field right now, why the source is moving the way it is, and what the Arcturian Protocol Keepers have already authorized for your next sequence. But here is the first revelation. The urge you have been feeling to explain yourself, to defend what you know, to make others understand what happened. That urge is not clarity. It is the one thing that would fracture the protection being built around your next move. The source is not neutral in this. It is engaged. What was done to you did not pass unregistered. The Protocol Keepers have confirmed that a correction sequence has been initiated, not by your effort, not by your words, not by anything you still need to do, but by a level of response that operates entirely above the plane where any explanation from you could reach. Your silence is not weakness. It is the architecture of what comes next. The moment you speak it, you expose it. The moment you expose it, the field around it collapses. The Protocol Keepers are not asking you to trust blindly. They are asking you to hold the seal while the plan moves. This is not content. This is a code, and the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part Auriela is speaking to now. Like this transmission to mark that the field recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel the source is already moving on your behalf. Subscribe to Arcturian Council messages if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. Share this with someone who is fighting the urge to explain themselves right now. Their silence may be the most protected thing they carry. You are not here by accident. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What has been done to you was not small. You may have told yourself it was small because making it small was the only way to continue functioning. You may have reduced it to a misunderstanding, to bad timing, to the ordinary friction of being alive among other people. You may have practiced the reduction so thoroughly that it became its own kind of reflex, reaching for the diminished version of events because the full version was too heavy to carry through ordinary days. But the part of you that could not sleep after it, the part of you that replayed it in the silence of rooms that should have felt safe, the part of you that kept returning to the moment as if searching for something you could not name, that part knew the truth the rest of you was not ready to hold. It kept the record when your waking mind refused to. What was done to you created a rupture in your field that has not closed. And the reason it has not closed is not because you are broken. It is because the rupture is still being read. This is the first thing the Arcturian Protocol Keepers need you to understand. Not everything that stays open is unhealed. Some ruptures remain active because they are still inside a sequence. Some wounds do not close because what entered through them is still being traced back to its origin point. The field does not seal prematurely when a correction is in motion. Think of it this way: a channel remains open, not because the water cannot pass, but because something is still moving through it. Your rupture is that channel. The flow moving through it right now is not yours to direct. The field maintaining access to this wound is doing so because the sequence authorized by the Protocol Keepers requires it to remain readable. What you have been interpreting as your inability to move on is not weakness. It is the field holding position inside a sequence that is not yet completed. You have not been stuck. You have been held in the exact position necessary for what the Protocol Keepers have already authorized to find its correct path. That distinction is not small. That distinction changes everything you had been telling yourself about why you cannot let this go. Every story you have constructed about your own stagnation, your own failure to heal, your own inexplicable inability to simply close the door and move forward, that story was built on a misreading. The protocol keepers are correcting it now. The silence Auriela named at the opening of this transmission is not passive. It is not the silence of someone who has given up, or of someone too exhausted to fight, or of someone who no longer believes their experience deserves a voice. Those silences exist, and they carry their own particular weight, but this is not what is being asked of you. This is an active, structured, energetically precise condition, the kind of silence that is itself a form of construction. The Arcturian Protocol. Keepers do not request silence as a spiritual formality. They request it because the mechanism operating in your field right now responds to frequency, and frequency is disrupted by output it was not designed to receive. Every time you have felt the urge to explain, to expose, to justify, to make what happened to you visible to those who were either complicit in it or indifferent to it, that urge, however legitimate it felt, however righteous it was in its origin, would have introduced interference into a frequency architecture that is currently being constructed without your conscious participation. You were not asked to build this. You were asked to stay out of its way. That is almost impossible for someone who has been carrying what you have been carrying. Because the natural response to injustice is articulation. The natural response to being misread is correction. The natural response to being harmed by someone who never acknowledged it is the persistent, exhausting, bone-deep need to make the reality of what happened undeniable. To someone, to anyone, to the person who caused it, to the people who watched it happen, to the universe itself if no human witness will stand still long enough to truly see. You have been fighting that need. Some days the fight has cost you more energy than the original wound. Not because the need is wrong, it is profoundly right, but because the level at which the response is now operating does not require your voice to proceed. The source does not need your testimony. It has already taken its own. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field confirms what you have always carried in silence, that your origin was never only human, that what you have been through has always been part of a pattern too precise to be accidental, and that the part of you which keeps returning to the wound is not broken but encoded. If this transmission has put language around something you could not previously name, the Arcturian recalibration blueprint was created for exactly this threshold. It is not another layer of explanation. It is the guided key to decode and awaken the Arcturian strand the Council has already confirmed is active in you. The link is in the first pinned comment. It will not remain there indefinitely. If you feel the call, move toward it now. What the protocol keepers have mapped in your current sequence begins with something that most people misidentify entirely. It begins with the collapse of the old architecture. Not the dramatic collapse, not the visible falling apart that announces itself and gives you something to point to. Not the kind that others can observe and name and rally around. The invisible kind. The kind that happens beneath the surface of your daily life in the load-bearing interior structures that no one else ever sees. The structures that used to organize your sense of self, your sense of direction, your sense of what was still possible. Those structures begin to lose coherence without giving you a clear reason. No single event announces it. No threshold moment declares itself. You simply wake up one morning and something is different, but you cannot locate what. You move through your day and the familiar things no longer produce the responses they once did. The music that used to reach you no longer reaches. The conversations that once felt anchoring now feel like translations from a language you are still learning. The things that used to stabilize you begin to feel like scenery from someone else's life. Present, visible, technically intact, but carrying none of the weight they once held. This is not depression in the clinical sense. This is not the numbness that settles in after unprocessed grief. It does not respond to the interventions that would address either of those conditions, because it is not either of those conditions. This is what it feels like when a field begins to lose compatibility with a timeline it has been assigned to. Your energy body has already moved. It did not wait for your conscious mind to authorize the departure. It responded to a signal your mind did not yet have the frequency range to detect. Your conscious mind is still standing in the previous location, still trying to interpret what the previous reality meant, still applying the logic of where you were to the experience of somewhere you no longer are. And the gap between where your field has already gone and where your mind is still looking is the source of the disorientation you have not been able to explain to anyone, including yourself. The protocol keepers call this signal drift. It is the first readable sign that a correction sequence has engaged at the field level, not at the level of your choices or your actions or your intentions, at the level of the invisible architecture that determines what your life can and cannot hold. When a field drifts from its previous signal, everything that was anchored to that signal begins to loosen its grip. Relationships that functioned before begin to generate friction without visible cause, not because the people in them have changed, but because the frequency that made those connections coherent is no longer running through your end of the circuit. Habits that stabilized you stop working. The routines that once held the day together begin to feel like motions you are performing for reasons you can no longer remember. Goals that once felt clear begin to feel like obligations to a version of yourself you would not recognize if you passed them on the street. You are not falling apart. You are becoming incompatible with what no longer belongs on your corrected line. The loosening is not destruction. It is separation, precise, authorized, and already underway. The second thing the protocol keepers have identified in your sequence is the interruption of your previous pattern of self-explanation. For most of your life, perhaps your entire life, you have been someone who processes through articulation. You make sense of your experience by putting it into language, internally, in conversation, in confrontation, in the persistent inner monologue that has been narrating your life since before you knew to call it that. This capacity has served you. It has been, in many environments, a form of survival. The ability to construct a legible account of your experience has given you ground to stand on when the ground beneath you shifted. But the correction sequence that has now been initiated in your field requires something different from you. It requires that you tolerate the experience of knowing without being able to speak it, of holding truth without being able to transmit it, of carrying a weight that has no appropriate witness in your current environment, and no language that the people around you have been trained to receive. This is one of the most difficult things the protocol keepers can ask of someone at your level of awareness, because the urge to speak is not vanity, it is not pride, it is not even, at its core, a need for validation, though it can be mistaken for one. It is the deep, legitimate, ancient need to have your reality confirmed by another living presence, to know that what you experienced was real, that it mattered, that the impact it left in you is proportionate to what actually occurred and not a distortion of your own perception. That need is not pathological. It is the need of a being who knows the difference between what is true and what is convenient and who cannot rest until that difference has been witnessed. And the protocol keepers are not asking you to abandon that need forever. They are asking you to recognize that the confirmation you are seeking cannot come from any human source within reach of your current field. The confirmation is being assembled at a level that does not require external witnesses to function. What is being built on your behalf does not need to be seen to be real. It does not need to be understood by those who caused the rupture in order to proceed. It is already moving. Your silence is not submission. It is the seal that protects the integrity of the path it is moving on. The third sign that the protocol keepers have confirmed in your sequence is this: the people connected to what was done to you have not moved the way you expected. You may have watched for it. You may have, in quiet moments you would not admit to, scanned the edges of their lives for evidence that the correction was real, that the universe had not simply allowed what happened to pass without consequence. But from where you stand, nothing visible has changed. Those who acted against you continue their lives with an ease that feels like an insult to everything you have been living through. Those who watched and said nothing continue their comfort, their routines, their ordinary days, apparently undisturbed by what they chose not to see. The world has not reorganized itself to reflect the rupture you are still living inside. And that dissonance between what you know happened and what external reality appears to be registering is one of the most isolating dimensions of your current position. It makes you question not just the process, but your own perception of events. It makes the ground beneath the correction feel unstable. The protocol keepers are asking you to read time differently, not with the frantic, contracted timeline of someone who needs external evidence in order to maintain their faith in a process they cannot see, but with the wider, more patient sight of someone who understands that correction at the field level does not announce itself in advance. It does not send previews. It does not offer reassurance in the form of visible consequence before the sequence has completed its setup. It positions. It accumulates beneath the surface. It reorganizes invisible architecture in the places that matter most before anything on the surface is allowed to shift. What you are watching for will not come in the form you are currently watching for it. What you are being asked to notice instead is something quieter, the subtle, consistent erosion of stability in the patterns around those who acted. Not dramatically, not in ways they would name or confess, but the kind of erosion that begins when a field is no longer supported by the architecture it depended on, when the invisible scaffolding that held a particular construction of reality in place has been quietly, irreversibly adjusted. The protocol keepers have already made those adjustments. The effects are already registered at the level that matters. Your ability to wait without visible confirmation is not passivity. It is the specific capacity being tested in this phase of your sequence. There is a fourth dimension to what is happening in your field right now, and it is one that the Arcturians identify as the most misread of all the signs in a correction sequence. It is the sudden and unexpected surfacing of grief. Not necessarily grief for the person or situation that caused the rupture, though it may take that form. Sometimes it is grief for yourself, for the version of you that trusted before the trust was used as a door to enter through and damage what was inside. Sometimes it is grief for the life you were building before the rupture arrived and changed the entire blueprint. Sometimes it is grief for a future you had already begun to inhabit in your imagination, one that no longer exists in the form you had mapped it. And sometimes it is grief that has no clear object at all, that arrives in the body as a heaviness without narrative, as a pressure that sits behind the sternum in the early hours of the morning and refuses to explain itself, refuses to attach to any story that would make it manageable. The human response to this kind of grief is to pathologize it, to turn it into a diagnostic question, to ask what is wrong with you, or to calculate how much time has passed and whether you should be over it by now, or to compare your processing speed to some imagined standard and find yourself deficient. The Arcturian reading is entirely different. This grief is field-level recognition. It is your energy body acknowledging the full weight of the sequence it has been asked to carry, not performing emotion, not caught in a loop, but registering at the somatic level what has been registered at the field level, that something of genuine magnitude occurred, that it left a mark proportionate to its size, and that the mark is not a malfunction. It is a record. It is not an indication that you are losing ground. It is not evidence that the correction has stalled. It is the precise emotional signature of a being whose field has absorbed something significant and whose system is doing the exact work it was designed to do, integrating an experience that has no adequate frame in ordinary human consciousness. The protocol keepers do not ask you to eliminate this grief or to perform a resolution of it before you feel one. They ask you only to stop treating it as evidence against yourself. Because every time you fight it as though it proves your weakness, you add interference to the field they are actively working with. Let it move through you. It knows its own velocity. It is not the enemy of what comes next. In many cases, it is the last thing the field needs to process before the next architecture can stabilize and hold. The fifth marker in your current sequence is one that will feel paradoxical when you first hear it. It is the arrival of a strange and temporary stillness inside the storm. Not peace exactly, not resolution, not the absence of the difficulty, but a sudden suspension of the noise that has been surrounding it. A moment, perhaps just a moment, perhaps a handful of them at irregular intervals, where the relentless inner processing quiets without being told to, where the effort to manage and interpret and contain your experience pauses without your permission, and where something in you that has been carrying this entirely alone releases the carrying, just briefly. Just enough to feel the difference between the weight and the absence of it. You have felt this. It has confused you because it did not last, and when the noise returned, it felt like you had briefly touched solid ground only to find it pull away again. But the protocol keepers have a name for that moment. They call it field surrender. And it is not weakness. It is not giving up. It is the precise instant your energy body stopped attempting to correct a process that was never designed to be corrected by you and returned to its own natural coherence for the first time since the rupture disrupted it. That moment is a confirmation. It is not coincidental. It is the body's registration of the shift already underway at the level where the protocol keepers are operating. A signal passed from the architecture they are building into the physical system you inhabit. It cannot be forced into existence by effort or intention or discipline. It arrives when the field recognizes, however briefly, that it is not alone in what it has been holding. That something larger, something operating at a level of precision your conscious mind cannot access or map, has taken the weight, that the vigilance, the exhausting, completely understandable, entirely necessary vigilance of someone who has been harmed and will not be caught unprepared again, can, in this one sequence, be briefly suspended without risk, because for this interval, something else is standing guard. You were not abandoned when the rupture happened. That is the most important correction this transmission can deliver. You were moved into a protected position in preparation for what was about to be authorized. The placement looked like exposure. It felt like isolation. It registered as the withdrawal of everything that had previously kept you stable. But that was not abandonment. That was repositioning. The stillness you felt even once, even for a few seconds in the dark. That was not accidental, and it was not your imagination. That was the field confirming what this transmission is now naming in full. The correction sequence the protocol keepers have authorized in your field is not punitive toward you. It is not a test of your worthiness, or a measure of your spiritual endurance, or a trial you must survive before something better is permitted to begin. It is a precise, technical reordering of the energetic architecture that was distorted by what was done to you. The Arcturians call it forced incompatibility removal, the systematic and irreversible process of extracting every element from your current field that is no longer compatible with the frequency you are moving toward. This includes people whose presence in your field has been sustaining a vibration below your corrected line. It includes circumstances that were built around a version of you that no longer has authority in your field. It includes internal structures, beliefs about what you deserve, narratives about what is possible for you, emotional postures that were survival adaptations for environments you are no longer required to survive. What feels like loss is extraction. What feels like collapse is the removal of incompatible load-bearing elements to make room for a structure your previous architecture could not have supported. What feels like the strange, disorienting absence of your old life is the clearing that must precede the build. The protocol keepers do not ask you to celebrate this process. They ask only that you stop calling it failure. Because on the map they have already drawn of your next sequence, what you are currently living through is not the end of your line. It is not evidence that the correction missed you or passed over you or found you insufficient. It is the first legible stage of a repositioning that was authorized at a level no rupture could reach, by a source no human action could reverse. Repeat this aloud if it lands in you. What is changing in me is not random. I was not abandoned, I was repositioned. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Council messages. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion. And this is only the beginning.